Something that we don't talk a lot about is the sheet metal tariff or the aluminum steel tariffs that are coming in right now. It's 50%. It affects everything.
Hello, I'm Heather Wilkinson with JM&A Group, and I'm your host today for JM&A Group's Walk Around podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about some really great topics that are driving the automotive industry. First of all, tariffs, affordability, and really around dealers' digital strategy and their claim strategy as we deal with the uncertainty that's in the market today. I'm joined by two of our guests, Jonathan Jordan and Jamie Horowitz, who are here to talk a little bit about where the industry is going and how our dealers and the retail industry can really prepare for what's forthcoming. As you can see, our co-host, our lead co-host, Mark Spoto, isn't with us today, and we are here to represent JM&A Group in the Walk Around podcast. Jonathan, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Of course, Heather, great to be here with you. I'm Jonathan Jordan, Director of Performance Development Services here at the JM&A Group. I'm missing Mark a little bit today, but I know we're in good hands.
We are going to represent Mark Spoto quite well, right? Jamie?
I'm Jamie Horowitz. I'm AVP of Client Support and Analytics at JM&A Group. I'll do my best to fill in for Mark, I guess.
And Jamie, it's your first time, right?
Yeah.
I am a first-timer.
First-time guest, first-time caller.
First-time, long-time.
But we're really looking forward to hearing from you, Jamie, and your insight really around data, because data drives everything that we do in the automotive industry. So before we jump right into the topics, want to kind of level set where we are, because as of the first week of June, we all know that what's going on in the automotive industry and really in the economy at large is tariffs are a constantly moving target. So we are very glad to have both of you here today. And just to dig in a little bit, I wanted to open up by sharing where we are. According to Automotive News and Reuters, as of the first week of June, tariffs on imported vehicles from most countries are 25%. The latest court rulings have not changed auto tariffs as of this week. Vehicles that are imported from Canada and Mexico that comply with the USMCA are subject to a 25% tariff only on their non-US content. A wide range of imported auto parts is subject to a 25% tariff. And the list of parts includes powertrain, transmission, safety components, and among others. The latest court's decision as of this week, the first week in June, did not change the auto parts tariff. So that just kind of level sets kind of where we are today, because we know, again, this can be a moving target as we go along. So Jamie, I'd really like to start out with you, because tariffs are really impacting parts pricing, claims pricing, et cetera. And so want to talk about how are tariffs disrupting parts pricing and availability, and what trends are you seeing emerging, and how dealers should be thinking about where they source their parts? How should they be handling repairs? How do they handle questions when their consumers come in and say, hey, is the repair that I'm having done today going to cost me more? And then we'll move into a little bit about shifting claims patterns that you might see. But let's start out with sourcing parts and talk a little bit about that.
So it's interesting. The tariffs are widespread. As you mentioned, 25%. Even some parts that are constructed in China or Canada and Mexico are not USMCA compliant. So we have to kind of look at all of that. Mm-hmm. I think for our dealers, one of the biggest things that they can do is look at their sourcing of parts. Whether they have an alternate part provider. We use LKQ, like kind quality, or some aftermarket parts that are of standard of OE. Mm-hmm. And that can help reduce costs, seeing where those parts come from. Something that we don't talk a lot about is the sheet metal tariff or the aluminum steel tariffs that are coming in right now. It's 50%. It affects everything. So even if parts change, we still have a steel tariff, and steel is used to make body parts and things of that for the dealer. That is one of the biggest things that our dealers are going to be challenged with for the future. And something that we're trying to help them with is just how do you source those parts? Do you have a partner that you can leverage their size to get better parts pricing? And looking at where those parts are coming from.
Yeah. So, we saw in the first couple of months when the tariff decisions were made, a lot of pull ahead purchases on vehicles. Was that similar in the parts area? Did we see that happening where dealers were buying and sourcing parts earlier, and has that helped?
So starting in January, there's two ways to measure inflation. And we've been looking at a different subsector of inflation for the automobile repair and maintenance in urban areas. So that really looks at what's happening in fixed operations versus the overall CPI. They don't always move in the same direction. So in May, we're going to be looking to see what's happening with inflation in that sector. And we've seen that that's running higher than the overall market. So if the US is at 2.3, automotive repair is above 5. Wow. And so that really speaks to what's happening with automotive parts. There was some pull ahead. And you could see that even in other industries in the United States. Walmart was buying inventory ahead so that they could keep their prices low longer to see how everything plays out. Some of that also happens in the automotive industry. Dealers are a little bit different because they're financing all of that parts that sit on the shelf. So they have a double motivation, wanting to turn inventory and not hold as much as well.
Will we see an impact in labor costs? So we're talking a lot about parts. Do you think there'll be some impact that dealers will have to look at from their hourly labor rate that they're charging?
So one of the things I think besides labor rate, because I think labor rate will move with inflation, is the time. So if parts aren't available or costly, where today a dealer may replace something, they might have to actually reconstruct, which takes more time. And that would run up some costs in the store.
All things that dealers need to be thinking about constantly. Jonathan, just taking a little bit different perspective from the fixed operations side to really the variable side of the dealership and looking at sales and F&I, how can the retail industry really think about how they can reposition F&I products, not as an add-on on upsell for a customer, but really they are essential products to protect yourself against the affordability and managing affordability and budget. How could they be positioning that with their customers?
First of all, and this is not new, it's something we've always said, is that F&I shouldn't be a bolt-on process. It shouldn't be something that happens only at the end of purchasing a car. It should be something that dealers are starting to think about as soon as a customer clicks on their website, makes a phone call into the dealership, shows up in the showroom, to start endorsing these products, to start explaining these products, to start talking about why F&I is important. And I would argue that even extends beyond the sale as well, as the customer has their ownership journey throughout the car. A lot of times we think about that point of sale being the only opportunity to sell F&I products, and really every touch point with the customer is a potential opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
I think, just listening to Jamie right now, if I'm an F&I manager and I'm listening to this, I'm really paying attention to these stats and to what's going on, and I'm using them when I'm talking to customers. We've said for years that a great selling point for a service contract or a prepaid maintenance plan is, hey, this is an opportunity to lock in at today's cost, to not worry about inflation down the road. But I think to a lot of consumers, when we said that a couple of years ago, it didn't necessarily resonate. It was kind of like, yeah, inflation's something my grandfather talked about when he talked about how cheap a Coca-Cola used to be or something like that, but it didn't affect me.
Exactly.
And now everybody feels it.
That's right.
Regardless of what you're buying. And we're seeing that messaging really resonate in the F&I office, and our penetration rates on F&I products are showing it. They've gone up in the last few months.
Absolutely. I mean, consumers are looking at even keeping vehicles longer now. Statistically, we're seeing that the average term of ownership today, I want to say his last stat I saw was 12.6 years.
Yep.
And so when consumers are keeping vehicles longer, they're going to want to make that investment to make sure the vehicle is running well. They're not going to have the unexpected out-of-pocket expense. And in many instances, passing that vehicle along to other family members within their household rather than going out and buying a new vehicle. And with these F&I products, obviously comes the opportunity for claims, right? And I want to just take a step back because we did touch on a little bit about claims. So Jamie, are you seeing a shift in claims patterns or service contract usage based on kind of what we talked about, more product sales?
So we've definitely seen some changes in ownership. So claims on higher mileage vehicles. And this has been going on since COVID. So we're really in an unprecedented time as far as what's happening in the industry. So if you think back, we had COVID, we had supply chain disruptions and some other things in the market. We haven't really seen that since the late 2000s, 2008. And so we're in this phase right now where there's some things happening macroeconomically, and it's impacting what's going on with how people hold cars. We did see some pull ahead volume, so some coming out of cars, but the reality is cars are getting a little bit older on the street, and that increases the propensity for claims. Our dealers can do things to kind of control costs.
What are some of those things they could be doing?
The biggest, I think, is retention. So if you're thinking about a service contract, you want to get those customers to come back to your store. It's one way to drive revenue into your dealership. I think that's really important. You want to make sure that you're getting vehicles in. It's another way where you control the costs and where you can really manage that. The other thing we're looking at is some of those older cars get traded out. So we're looking at the behavior of what's happening with claims and what's going on the used car selling side, and how are we reconditioning cars? Are we putting warranties on cars? Are we being consistent with the process? Because when there is inflation and there's going to be a run up, let's say, on new car prices, used cars will rise with it. Consumers aren't really thinking so much now about the warranties. So the cars are rolling out and there's some exposure for our customers, the dealers. And so looking at those processes and making sure that they're being consistent to help manage those expenses, because they don't want to have undue expenses and also bad consumer experiences.
That's right. You know, the things that you've laid out so far, Jamie, really are fundamentals in the automotive industry. We hear time and time again how resilient car dealers are. And it's when we get back to the basics of what I heard you say, consistency, right? Consistency in our process, consistency in presenting products, consistency in how we're reconditioning our vehicles, consistency in how we are offering the products that are going to get the customers to come back to our dealerships. And not only service contracts, but also we have other products that are out there across the automotive industry that really retain customers and help, you know, avoid that affordability. Let's talk a little bit about prepaid maintenance.
When you think about a product like that and how you sell that product, it's a product that gives a customer a lot of convenience to come back into the store, have their maintenance taken care of. But I know that I probably starting to sound like a little bit of a broken record here, but like the customer, when they look at that product, oftentimes they're doing the math in their head, right? And they're saying, hey, this covers this, 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 and this. And we've always said, you're talking about today's prices, but what's it going to cost a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? And so that's an easy conversation to have with a consumer right now, you know, to be able to lock in at today's prices, not have to worry about it. But to take it a step further for the dealer, and Jamie mentioned retention earlier, a prepaid maintenance product is one of the best tools you can use to make sure that that consumer returns to your service department, spends money in your service department, and then when they're ready to buy another car, they know exactly where to go, and they're having a great experience, you know, along the way.
That's right. That's right. You know, thinking about the service department, Jonathan, I want to just take a little step there and looking at the service drive. And many times, dealers can find that to be a great space to offer up F&I products. How could dealers be utilizing the time when the customer's in the service department to offer F&I products, maybe if the customer didn't buy them when they purchased the vehicle? Yeah,
I mentioned earlier that like every touch point with the customer is a potential opportunity to sell F&I, and the service department is no exception. But there are really some key points throughout the ownership process where it really makes sense to have a conversation with a consumer about an F&I product. And to give you a few examples, one of those is when that customer's factory warranty is about to expire. You have a customer who purchased a car from you, chose not to buy a service contract when they bought the car. Now the factory warranty is about to expire. It's a great opportunity to have a conversation with that customer and say, hey, just FYI, Heather, just so you know, your factory warranty is about to expire, you have the ability to purchase a service contract and take some of that risk, for future repairs off of you. And here's what it costs, here's what it looks like. Another opportunity is for a customer who purchased a service contract. Now that service contract is expiring, or maybe you have a customer who doesn't have a service contract, doesn't have a factory warranty, and they just made a pretty large repair and they had to pay out of pocket for it. So there's a lot of opportunities. What I would emphasize to dealers, though, is you've got to have the right processes and tools in place to do that. Service advisors are busy. They've got a lot going on. They've got a lot of customers they're juggling. They're working with techs. They're working with the parts department. They're doing so much throughout the day. And oftentimes, if you don't have the right process and the right tools to allow a service advisor to present F&I products, it just gets put on the back burner and it doesn't happen. And part of those tools that I don't want to forget is compensation. Their pay plan needs to be aligned to incentivize them to either sell a service contract or a prepaid maintenance plan, or potentially refer a customer to potentially your F&I department to facilitate that sale as well. But either way, the service advisor needs to participate in that and be incentivized to make sure that happens.
That compensation drives the performance, right?
Always.
It always comes down to people, process, technology, but the pay plan has to support what you're driving.
For sure.
Yeah. So last topic I would really want to touch on today is everyone's thinking about AI, right? And artificial intelligence, data, and Jamie, first time guest, but you're knocking it out of the park. So I really want to hear from you today around online claims tools and artificial intelligence and how we can look at data. How is that streamlining service operations? And what's the real impact for dealers that are listening today on efficiency and customer satisfaction?
So I'm going to take a step back and just say AI really depends on clean data. So if you think about your service advisors in a store, they call into a customer contact center that might have 200 people in it. So they could call, in theory, 200 times and talk to 200 different people, interpreting what they're saying 200 different ways. So being able to use an online portal, it allows for some consistency. And that is what really allows AI and decision engines to grow, getting consistent input. The other thing it allows a customer to get out of the store quicker, because now you're not on the phone waiting. You're not relying on speeds of answer time or getting responses. You're putting in the claim and you're putting it in consistently. So it allows for quicker approvals and allows your consumer to get out the door quicker and a better seamless experience. From an AI perspective, it allows for cleaner data and it allows for learning mechanisms to continue to grow. That's what it's really all about. So for a dealer to encourage their fixed ops people to use these tools is really to help them. It also helps drive accountability because it allows for us to identify when processes aren't consistent or when there's some anomaly where something is happening. We can identify that easier and help inform the dealer and change processes. I talked about reconditioning. That shows up a lot when you use online tools. It's like, oh, well, this person is very consistent and they're doing the right thing, but it's in this span of time. And these are certain things that should show up when you're reconditioning the car. It's not to hurt anybody in the store, but it's to say, hey, this is something you could change in your process. So using that approach, you can then say, hey, we're going to change the way we do our inspection process, our recondition process. It's all in the benefit of the consumer, so they have a better experience.
And many times it's around how it's messaged. From a dealer's perspective, they're looking at, okay, overall picture, is this a cost saving, easier experience for the customer? Is this going to cause efficiency? But for the service advisors, service managers out there listening, AI and these additional processes that are driven to expedite the process, it's not eliminating the service advisor, would you say? It's not eliminating the warranty administrator or the service manager. What's it really doing?
It's just speeding up the process, right? And making it more consistent so that you can deal with the consumer and then you can do what you have to do with the dealership.
And what's the customer ultimately want to do? Get in and out, right?
Get in and out and pay as little as possible.
Absolutely. That's right. It's pay as little as possible. Final thoughts, Jonathan, that you'd like to share with our listeners today as it relates to tariffs, affordability, really making sure the processes are easy for the customer from the front end to the back end.
Yeah, I want to add to something Jamie just said around data. And when you think, if I'm a dealer and I'm thinking about AI in the future, data would be what I'm really thinking a lot about right now. And, is my data organized? Is it clean? Does it all live in the same place? And our industry, it's not odd for a dealer to be using 4, 5, 6, 7 different pieces of technology to facilitate the sale of a car. And that's worked because we've kind of had humans that are guiding people along and through that process. But are you getting all of the data points from all those technologies? Are you putting them in one place? Because if you're not, you're going to be limited when you think about AI. Now, I talked to a lot of F&I managers, a lot of sales managers, dealers about AI, and there's some fear out there around like, what is this going to mean for me and my job? And I think the message is this is all about making you better. This is all about giving you more tools to provide a better customer experience. But I heard somebody say this the other day, and it's, you shouldn't be worried about AI taking your job. You should be worried about people who use AI taking your job if you don't use AI. And so it's something we should all be paying attention to, even if it's with really small things right now, like how can it kind of take a few things off my plate every day and make them smoother, easier, faster? And then in the future, how could it really be a transformative for my business?
Absolutely. As simple as a communication text follow-up to a customer at anywhere where whether they're selling the vehicle, where they're following up on F&I and service. How can you expedite that process using tools and technology?
For sure. But you asked me about tariffs.
Yes.
So, and I didn't answer your question. I think I'm going to go back to, we've talked a lot about data, and this is not new. We've talked about data for a long time, but if you're someone in the dealership who sells F&I, whether it be a salesperson or an F&I manager, it's super important to be on top of what's going on in the world as it relates to tariffs, but more specifically, how does it relate to parts cost and labor cost and ownership cost down the road for a vehicle, and being able to put real data in front of consumers as they're making decisions about how they want to protect their vehicle is super important. And it's more important now than it's ever been because it's so top of mind for anybody who's watched the news or picked up a newspaper or read an article. Like they're thinking about tariffs and they're thinking about what this means for them and their budget. And so being able to have that conversation in an educated way, in an informed way with a consumer is really driving results for service contract sales, prepaid maintenance sales, road hazard tire and wheel protection sales, and also creating good experiences for consumers down the road as well.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say, Jonathan, is as an F&I manager, salesperson, or sales manager, I need to be informed and ready when that customer comes in. Because customers are walking into the dealership asking, hey, is there a tariff, a price adjustment on this vehicle? And I, as an F&I manager, salesperson, need to be ready to answer that question. If they're not ready for that type of question, it's going to impact their credibility. Would you agree?
For sure. And like what we're seeing right now is you're seeing a lot of consumers who are coming in to purchase a car. And one of the top reasons they're doing it right now is they're concerned about pricing impacts from tariffs down the road. And a lot of manufacturers, we really haven't seen that yet. And so literally the reason they're sitting in the showroom is because of tariffs. So it's a conversation that should extend in the F&I office as well.
Absolutely. Jamie, final thoughts you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
Kind of echoing what Jonathan said is just being aware of what's happening in the industry, right? And it's not so much just the thing you hear about auto tariffs. There's other things that happen that still impact the sale of a car, that still impact the service of a car, and things that we can do to help our consumer. And really for our partners, our dealer partners, is what we can do to help them or their save costs for themselves. Because if you're not really paying attention to it, these things can get away quickly. And how we can help manage that with them, or how they can help manage that for themselves, whether it's through parts procurement processes, just the little things, using consistent claim submissions. All these things add up over time, and it helps them to be the best possible operation they can be.
I hear control the controllables.
That's right.
Control where you're sourcing your parts. Control how you are submitting your claims. How timely are your submissions? How quickly you are able to access the information with the customer in front of you. And then also making sure you are getting your claims submitted quickly so the dealer's getting paid, right?
Right, absolutely.
You know, Jamie, first time guest, first time caller on the JM&A Walk Around podcast. I just want to say thank you. Fantastic job. Great insight that we're sharing with the retail automotive industry and our listeners out there. Thank you. Fantastic job. Jonathan Jordan, expert in digital retail and sales strategy. You're always insightful, and we certainly are so happy to have you here as our ghost guest. Our ghost is Mark Spoto, who's not here, but as our guest today on the Walk Around podcast.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you.